Okay, so hello and welcome to this CPD session. The presentation will provide a guide and reference point as we progress through the content this afternoon. We do encourage questions, so please use the question box to share any ideas or questions that you have. This session will be a mixture of providing information, exploring best practice, asking questions and sharing ideas. It's therefore vital that everyone participates fully, sharing their ideas in a collaborative way to allow for peer learning to take place. And if you look in the handout section of the control panel, you'll see the presentation that we're using today. If you haven't already done so, please let us know that you can hear us okay by using the question box, which as I say is in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We will be sharing links and information in the chat box. Please be aware that if you need to share anything with us, it needs to be through the question box, as this webinar platform does not allow us to use the chat box function in a two-way sort of context. So I'm Helen Scanlon. I'm part of the provider development team. My background is varied. I've got vocational teaching experience. I'm a literacy and numeracy specialist, and I have teaching and assessing experience from a range of settings, including schools, colleges, and private training organisations, teaching courses and qualifications from pre-entry to master's level. I've got a master's degree in education and professional development. I worked for a number of years in a quality improvement role, and I've been a curriculum leader and lecturer in teacher training, and I also have experience of being part of formal Ofsted inspections. I've been working with our Education and Childcare T Level since May 2020, and I'm going to be sharing the learning from this throughout today's webinar. And you can see on the screen now the objectives for today's session. Session will last an hour, and it is being recorded to allow all relevant colleagues to access it. We're also joined today by Janet King, NCFE Sector Manager for Education and Childcare. Hello, Janet, and thanks again for joining us today.
Hello, Helen. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the session, Helen.
Lovely, thanks, Janet. Okay, we're going to get started by asking a poll question and asking you to respond to the first poll question, which is, how important are formative assessment activities in T levels? Are they more important to the teachers, tutors or assessors? Are they more important to the students? Are they more important for the industry staff, the placement staff, sorry, or are they all of equal importance to those people? So I'm just going to launch that poll now, and I'd like you to choose the answer that you believe to be most relevant to yourself in your current context. I'll just leave that open for a while to give everyone the opportunity to vote for us. Thank you. So we're currently at 33%. So as I say, I'll just leave it open a bit longer to let everybody have the opportunity. I'll be closing the poll shortly. So if you'd like to vote, please do. Oh, we're at 100%, so that's great. Okay, I'll close the vote now and I'll just share the results. As you can see, everybody said they're all of equal importance. So thank you for that. So we all have an awareness that formative assessment is very important to track progress on any course for the teachers, the tutors, the students, the assessors, placement staff. T-levels are no different. Other than historically, vocational courses typically used assignment and project work as their summative assessment strategy, and then these could be used as formative assessment tasks as well as the learners progress through the course. We'll therefore need to use a range of formative assessment methods and activities to assess students' ongoing progress in relation to their T level, to allow us to adapt teaching and learning activities and interventions appropriately. So the focus of today's session is not to explore why we should carry out formative assessment, but to explore and evaluate the methods that we do use, how they could be adapted and best used for T levels. Janet, I'm going to ask if you have anything sector specific you'd like to add here, please.
Thanks, Helen. I think when we think of formative assessment with the T level, one of the biggest changes really is in that sort of from modular, as you've mentioned, through to linear in terms of that synoptic formal assessment at the end or towards the end of the core, and the same in the occupational specialisms. So I think it brings formative assessment into a sort of more critical and significant spotlight. and especially perhaps one that's been even more channeled down that spotlight with the tags and so on, and formative assessment being so important and critical in informing the teacher assessed grades that we've previously and recently gone through. So formative assessment, I think, just becomes really important, and it's about making the links between the theory as we go through that linear approach, and to show that application of understanding, and also about that coherence of practical understanding and application in with the theory as well. So I would say it really is holistic to what we can see in the T level now.
Great, thanks, Janet. We're aware that there's a large amount of experience and knowledge in the session today from yourselves, so we'll be asking for this to be shared as much as we can. Okay, we'd like to get started by asking for your definition of formative assessment. Can you please put your ideas into the question box, please? So what would be your definition of formative assessment, please? Just a quick one-liner, quick one sentence, just to summarise what your definition would be, please. And as you do that, I'm going to open the question box so that I can share people's answers. So thank you to those who have already popped something in there. We'll just give you a bit longer. I'm going to start sharing what people are saying. So it's the process of checking learning as it happens kind of thing is what somebody said. So thanks for that. And also the ongoing assessment of learner progress. Brilliant. So thank you so far. So any other ideas, please pop them into the question box for us. So ongoing assessment which informs tutors and students of their current understanding, absolutely. So it's a snapshot at a certain time, so thanks for that. Ongoing assessment of learner progress and understanding, yes, brilliant. So that's a holistic view, isn't it? Both of those talk about the understanding, progress, etc. on the programme. So you can break formative assessment down into different areas. Lovely, thanks for that, everybody. Okay, it's really useful for you to hear the ideas from each other, so thank you for that. We're going to recap and run through some definitions. And this first example, you can see, highlights the need for assessment to take place as the learning is happening, as some of our attendees already have said. So this reinforces the need for the activity to be ongoing and explains how it differs from summative assessment. So the second example brings in the need for a range and variety of methods teachers should use. And I think it's really important because if we over-rely on the same assessment method, this could demotivate our students and also disadvantage some depending on their preferred learning style and any support needs. And then this final example brings in the need for assessment activities to be contextualised, which is also vital and important, but also used to assess students' characteristics, which I think is an interesting point and implies a more holistic approach to formative assessment. I also think that the reference to it taking place at several times during the course refers to more formal formative assessment activities, as I would suggest that formative assessment takes place extremely regularly in every contact we have with the students in a more informal context. We use ongoing assessment activities to constantly check for understanding and rates of progress, and this also includes the depth of learning for individuals, and it informs our future teaching, learning and assessment practice. Okay, we're now going to share the learning about formative assessment from the first year of T Level delivery. So the images on the screen now are representative of assessment and target setting. The important factor to consider for T Levels is that the qualification and assessment are designed to produce work-ready, skilled students, because it's not only knowledge-based. And this is the difference between T Levels and A Levels. Formative assessment shouldn't focus only on the progress towards passing the exams and the employer set project. It should also assess development of the application of that knowledge in the industry. Saying that, if there's a delay in starting an industry placement, then best practice would be for teachers to bring in real life examples into the classroom and of course independent study activities to make that learning come to life. The second factor relates to retention of knowledge, not only for the exams in the following summer or autumn, but applying the knowledge and reviewing the knowledge and skills on an ongoing basis. We need to also remember the importance of the development of the wider skills, knowledge, competencies and confidences, the other and very important abilities needed in the industry, whilst also remembering to assess the individual breadth and depth of learning required for employment and of course success on the programme. That brings us to which method to use, and in year one of delivery, the centres who used a wide range of methods saw higher levels of engagement and motivation from the students. And then finally, who to involve in formative assessment activities. Best practice would be to include anyone that is relevant. So placement staff, any support staff or learning mentors, but most importantly, the students themselves. So let's continue with a recap of the learning journey, and I'm going to use this image of the mountain to represent the learning journey T-level students will make. So if we assume that they're starting at the base of the mountain at point A and their final destination at the top of the mountain at point C is the successful completion of that T-level program. So the yellow arrow shows how they get there, or does it? Because they might start off well, and the excitement and positivity of a new course normally gives the students a strong start, but then something happens and they might go off track. So we put in some interventions and support and they get back on track. Until something else happens, the course content is too challenging for them and they go off track again. And this time there might be a bit of a crisis in the learning and they find things really challenging. They might struggle to focus. And assessment activities show that they're not progressing, so further intervention, support and activities are put into place, which allows them to refocus and they get it and progress well. And nearing the end of the programme, there's a focused push and everything kind of falls into place. So your formative assessment activities will capture this learning journey for each student. They will track how the students progress in their learning, including on their industry placement, which interventions, support, additional learning activities and staff are involved, as well as reviewing of progress against their individual targets. Each organisation has their own tracking system with the results of initial and diagnostic assessments, existing qualifications, their ILP, their targets and the learning goals. So how you track is entirely up to you. What's important is that ongoing progress and development is tracked. Each student's learning journey is documented and they know exactly what they need to do to progress and excel in each aspect of their programme. So the next question I'd like to ask is, what is your favourite formative assessment method? Again, we'd like you to put this into the question box, please. You may also consider your students' preferred method. I don't need to tell you just need you to tell you your ideas, please, in the question box. So what's your favourite formative assessment method, please, is the question. Janet, do you have a favourite formative assessment method before we put our methods up?
I think I probably do. I think a lot of things for me would start with that sort of natural engagement in the classroom, discussions, and how individual students are engaging in those discussions, how they're applying themselves to perhaps to the group work that's being set, because we don't often think about what's going on in that sort of engaged in interactive activity as formative assessment. You know, we're thinking about something that has to happen afterwards. So I think discussion, and also I love role play scenarios, images, that sort of thing. And I know we'll come on to explore that further later.
Absolutely. We've got some answers coming in now, so thanks to everybody who's putting their ideas in. So discussions about previous learning, brilliant. Or also challenging in that discussion, knowledge or perceptions. Excellent, thank you for that. We've got some written tasks here, and I know during our last 18 months of COVID restrictions and disrupted learning, written skills are an area that students do need to practice and develop because they haven't had the chance to do so. So case studies, absolutely, thank you, and discussion. So a lot of talk, a lot of ideas here that relate to examples of things in practice, and then discussion and really pulling them apart and digging deeper into them. So thanks for that. Okay, brilliant. Some of the questions, I'm going to put some of the answers, well, some examples on the screen now. Some things I'd like you to do is just consider your current practice and start to review it, and ask yourselves these questions. Do you rely on a tried and tested method, or do you try out new approaches depending on the needs of your students? Do you focus on summative assessment preparation, or do you assess more holistically, thinking about the skills, knowledge and wider competencies needed for employment? Please also review the impact of your current formative assessment methods. How effective are they? Do they contribute to the learning experience? Do they tell you and your students what you need to know? So on the list on the screen now, you can see a range of methods, and which of these do you use? Do you use a wide enough range of activities? Do your students get assessment fatigue? And thinking more broadly, could you develop your practice to make things easier for you and or better for your students? I know I have my favourite methods as a teacher, but that I do need to be mindful that all students are different and respond differently. So making things fun, diversifying the approaches and reviewing the impact and success of my approach is really important. So we're now going to talk about feedback and feed forward. The difference between these is what we're going to explore. So they could be described as being linked to assessment of and assessment for learning. And it's useful to consider the difference between these when choosing, developing and using formative assessment activities. I'll explain what I mean by that. So feedback relates to what's been achieved at a specific point or via a particular assessment activity. So confirmation for the student of the knowledge, skills and competencies which have been demonstrated. Feed forward focuses on the next steps, specifically what the student needs to do to develop and progress, what they need to know to help them to continue to improve and develop their skills, knowledge and understanding moving forward. And from an Ofsted perspective, if they've done a piece of work that you might have marked and assigned a C grade to, does the student know in the next piece of work how to get a B or an A? How do they know what they've done and how they need to develop to get that higher grade? And that's the kind of thing that Ofsted look for when they talk about feedback and feed forward. But both types of information, advice or guidance from teachers should be used to plan future learning activities. And of course, remember that this will need to be tracked and recorded somewhere. Just a quick reminder to use the question box if you have any questions as we're talking this afternoon, please. So now let's explore what educationalists say about formative assessments using the work of Jeff Petty and Dylan William. If you're looking to develop or improve your assessment practice, these suggest that trying out new approaches is the only way you'll improve it. Petty makes reference to best practice. And if you haven't already listened to some of Dylan Williams' ideas and experiences, he makes some really interesting points related to how formative assessment practices can have a positive impact on the learning experience, the student engagement, and of course the progress and motivation. So we're going to summarise some of the ideas from Petty and William. So firstly, traffic lights, probably nothing new, but they do suggest a few different ways you could use this approach. And the traffic lights could be on a card, there could be images, or even coloured cups that the students use. In this example, these examples from William, each student would be given 3 cardboard pictures or cups, one red, one amber, one green. As the lesson progresses, each student shows the level of their understanding by displaying the appropriate coloured picture or cup on top of or in front of their desk. Red means I don't understand what's going on here. Amber, I sort of get it, but I'm not very confident. And green, I understand this well and I could explain it to others. So the teacher can use that information really well to inform classroom activities. For example, say to a student in Amber Cup, tell me what you don't understand, and then ask a student to explain a green cup to answer the Amber student's question. Or the teacher could say, red people, please come to me on this table. Those with amber, find a student with green and work with them for the next task. So there's a variety of ways you can use the traffic light system. So C3 before me is what that acronym means. While students are working in class, they are asked to consult 3 peers before asking the teacher for help. This helps to build autonomy, consolidates the understanding of all students involved, and of course removes the reliance on the teacher for all the time, creating a more collaborative and autonomous learning environment. And then peer assessment to improve the answers, possibly without a model or criteria. So for example, the students could work individually on a practice exam, test or quiz. The students would then work in groups of 3 or 4 and share their answers on their unmarked papers. And then they work collaboratively to create the best composite answer from their individual papers. And then groups would then share their best idea or ideas with the rest of the class. Dylan Williams' book Embedding Formative Assessment highlights best practices including peer explaining and helping, using student-led groups, as these both lead to mastery learning where the students are more able to set the targets. He also suggests that teachers should activate students of their own learning and as instructional resources for each other, whilst providing feedback that moves the learning forward. Teachers should maintain a belief in and focus on improvement, not only measurement of performance. He also advocates students designing assessment criteria and test questions. Janet, can I bring in with some subject-specific knowledge here, please?
Yes, absolutely. So I think using some of these strategies and some of these approaches is really good. And I know that people on the call will have their own sort of tested and proven methods. I think what it reminds me of as well, really, is just that importance of formative assessment feedback. You know, feedback that we give to students is not just a way of testing our own as tutors, not just knowing what students understand for our records, but also reaffirming for students themselves, giving them that confidence. I also think that, you know, the idea of the traffic lights, for example, or something like that, or the C3 before me type thing, all of those things that are engaging your peers, I think that's difficult, you know, sometimes for young learners, because it's difficult engaging in that way, and being open and almost vulnerable to feedback from your peers, especially when you're not feeling very confident. So these are all great skills that really contribute to development in teaching and learning. So some really good ideas there, Helen.
Lovely, thank you. And of course, it'll develop confidence that they can then take into their industry placements and practice themselves. So hopefully they're not just assessment methods, they do contribute to teaching and learning too. Okay,
Absolutely.
yeah, we're gonna do a quick quiz, and I've put that link into the chat box. But we've also got a QR code, and that takes you to the same quiz. It's on Microsoft Forms. It's a quiz for you guys to complete, please. So either click on the link in the chat box, or scan that code with a smartphone or tablet if you have one handy. And that should take you to the form. I'm going to give you a minute or two just to get that quiz up, and then I'll show the quiz at the same time so that people who are watching the recording can also see the kind of questions that you were asked. So if you could just find your way to that quiz, please. And if you let us know if you have any problems, as I say, please use that question box if you need to. So hopefully when you find the quiz, this is what you should have in front of you. And it's a mixture of multiple choice and also like a Likert scale as well. So your first question is, what is the main benefit of formative assessment? So just please tick whichever box you see fit that you would like to. What type of guidance and advice can help students plan their learning priorities? And I will talk about some research I've read about grades as well. How frequently should teachers record and track student progress? True or false depends. Should you fully involve students in assessment of their progress? In element 6, which is about working with others, how important are the following professionals? And you can choose not at all, quite, very, or extremely. No right or wrong answer there. And same for number 6. How can industry placement experience support the formative assessment of the education curricula? Which of the following might be useful topics to explore a student appreciation of the wider governance in place for education and childcare? And that focuses on schools and governors. And then the most important aspect or aspects of successful formative assessment is or are, and that asks you to tick all that you feel apply. And then once you've done all your answers, you would click submit on the bottom. So as you do that, we'll go back to the top and then we'll start sharing your answers and the answers. But we'll do this as quickly as we can. I'll just refresh it to see how many responses we've had. Okay, so this is my view, and if you haven't used Microsoft Forms, I'm a bit of a technophobe and I find this really simple to do. So if you'd like some advice or guidance on doing this, please ask me, contact me, I can take you through it. So the main benefit of formative assessment, and really these are all benefits of formative assessment, but of course it kind of really depends on how it's done and then how the results are used. So yes, these are all benefits and it does tick a box for Ofsted, but what's really important is how it's done and how the results are used. Type of guidance or advice from teachers to help students plan is feed forward. And I did read some research about a teacher who had given some of his group grades only, some of his group feedback and feed forward only, and some of his group grades and feedback and feed forward. And the ones who only got feedback or feed forward did better than ones who got grades. They tend to see the grade, see the number, see the letter, and just say smashing, done. I know I would get a pass for that, so I'll just park it, I'll just leave it. Whereas if you don't get a grade and you just get that feedback and or feed forward, it had a more positive impact on their progress. So keep that in mind when you're deciding what feedback and feed forward to give. How frequently should should teachers record and track progress? When it's useful or relevant to both the teacher and the student, it would be our example, because it's not necessarily a time thing, and it's definitely not when the quality assurance department remind them, and it's not only during assessment weeks, it's all the time when it's relevant. Yes, it's true. Students should be fully involved in assessment of the progress. We've got the questions in relation to how important, and I say people have been submitting their answers, so I'll just quickly do a refresh just to show you what this looks like in my view as the creator of it. And it does give me an overview in pictorial and numerical forms of what people have said. So thankfully, this kind of assessment method also marks it for us, and just to save a bit of time, because I know how precious time is. How can the placement experience support formative assessment? Hopefully that's given you some things to think about the placement experience and how you could use that with your students. Which of the following might be topics to explore? And that'll depend on your context and the student's specialism and placements. So pick apart those different things that you could. And then the most important aspects of successful formative assessment are, and you can see the pictorial view and the numerical view there. I can also open that in Excel, and it gives me the overview of individual scores and also the group scores. So if you don't currently use Microsoft Forms, it does thankfully save a lot of time. Janet, anything you want to say about that before we move on?
Thank you. I think it's a really useful exercise, isn't it? It's something that you could do as a team. It's something that you could think about. It's something where you might want to sort of sit down with students as well and think about what formative assessment is, because they won't understand what formative assessment is, likely anyway. So it might be something where especially when peers are thinking about how to create formative assessment, how to be involved in peer-to-peer formative assessment, these things can really help you, especially if you're thinking about individual elements like we've got there on element 6, for example. So there's lots of different things you can do and think about within your staff team, self-reflection, and also I think something that could be used in this Microsoft form with students as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Janet. We'll keep moving on. Just a reminder again, still, if you have any questions, please pop them into the question box. So we're now going to move into some specific formative assessment ideas for you, but we're going to base them on the following principles, and that's having a range of assessment methods, not creating large amounts of extra work for teachers, involving the students as much as possible, them being part of the assessment activity rather than having them done to them, application of knowledge and skills to industry examples and practice, digging as deep as possible into the core knowledge and how it should be applied and reviewed in industry, and sharing student knowledge and experience, developing autonomy and analysis, and promoting peer learning and peer assessment. So we're going to start with this image. My first question is, tell us what this picture says to you. You can either pop that into the question box or just hold it in your mind, please. So what assumptions do you make about this child, and what do you base those assumptions on? While you're thinking about that, what might your students make of this picture? How would they respond to that same question? And if we were going to use this image as the basis of a case study, what would be included? I'm going to bring up some starter information and hand over to Janet to talk you through these next few slides.
Thank you. Thanks, Helen. Well, to me, this image is absolutely fantastic, because what we can do now with any photograph, with any image that we are using as part of a case study, is actually come away from the objectivity and really be quite subjective in terms of, what do you think? What is your opinion? And you could either create some sort of narrative, which Helen has done here. So we've got this lively 8-year-old is Sophia. She was born in Iran. She came to live in the UK with her parents and 3 younger brothers last year. So what a lot of rich information that we've already got with that narrative that goes with this image. So we know how old she is, we know what curricula she's likely to be following, we can think about her needs as an individual, we can question and pull apart and discuss legislation, stereotypes, inclusion, and all of that. But more than this, we're thinking about, okay, let's look at the facts. She's 8, curricula. She's born in Iran. What about the language issues? What about the family and the support that they might need? She's only been in the country for the last year, for the last 12 months, and she's got 3 younger brothers. So what about the family? What kind of support network do they need? And what about these three boys as well? So it's about, there's so much you can get from that that can be sort of used as formative assessment to bring in prior learning or to initiate learning from across the core, and indeed as appropriate to an occupational specialism, but just from an image that makes you sort of think more widely. And I think where students might, we sometimes say, right, okay, we're going to go away and research this, that, and the other. If we're providing a case study and we're providing a bit of narrative and an image, we can get even the quietest, less confident students to join in a discussion, and for some really rich interactive discussion to take place. So yeah, love that picture.
And we've also used it to create some questions based on the assumptions we make based on our knowledge and understanding. So we're just going to share the type of questions that we sort of came up with. And these could help um, prep for summative assessment as well. So very much in an assessment outcome 1 level, identifying legislation, but then moving higher, what factors might impact on our education? So that's more of assessment 2 outcome. And then these next 2 are more like assessment 3 outcomes that I'm going to leave for Janet to talk through.
Thank you. So we're beginning there, as Helen has said, really thinking about that sort of identify. Let's really sort of recall that legislation. Let's think about the factors we're going to start to describe, we're going to start to explain, and all of this can be happening in rich discussion, of course. And then we're able to begin to analyze. Okay, so you've said, based on those factors within your group, you've come up with this. How might those factors actually begin to sort of affect and impact individual circumstances? And then you can begin to sort of really get to grips with, well, what do we mean by analyze? We're beginning to think about why, we're beginning to rationalize situations, and then we're evaluating. What can you do about that then? Evaluate a range of strategies and relate those strategies to the work that you've done in that question 3, for example, in this particular context. So from that case study, from that image, and of course you could use any image and you could make up any question, and students themselves could make up a little story about it, which I think, giving that subjectivity really can motivate some learners to do that. But they're beginning to look at all of those assessment objectives from the recall right through to the evaluation, and they're doing so quite incidentally, really.
Absolutely. So taking that further, we're going to give you some more pictures. What we'd like you to do is to choose a picture and consider how you might use it with your students. Janet will talk through a couple of them, but just have a look at the pictures, decide on which one talks to you the best, which one you engage with the most, because you can get most out of it. And think about how you could use it, please. So Janet, over to you again.
Thank you. Well, I love the pictures. I absolutely love them, and I love the idea of being able to use them in any subjective way. Sometimes when we're using images like this and we're practicing for objectivity within an observation, for example, we're sticking clearly to the facts, almost, say exactly what you can see. But when we can use them in this way, they are exactly what it says on this slide. They're powerful. So in image 1 is, he looks surprised, this young boy. He looks excited. He could be singing, he could be reading. Are we thinking about literacy? Are we thinking about confidence? Are we comparing how we learn in one context to another? Are we thinking about the age for literacy, for speech, language and communication development? So much you can get from it. Image 2, again, very powerful. And we can use this to look at wider issues. So if we were being objective, of course, that the young girl is leaning against the side of a fence or something. But if we were thinking subjectively and creating a narrative and a story, so much richness can come from that. And we can explore, we could almost think about family factors, we could think about individual circumstance, we could really explore safeguarding. So many things could come from that narrative rather than researching a piece of legislation. In image 3, well, here we go, it's taken as orienteering by the looks of it on this one. So we could be thinking about problem solving, we could be thinking about metacognition, we could be thinking about how to engage boys in literacy. All kinds of debates and trends around that could come from this. And when we think about 4 and indeed 6, if we think about those two together for a moment, we're outdoors, we're outside, we're enjoying nature. So we could be introducing the benefits of being outdoors. We could be thinking of physical activity. We could be thinking of holistic well-being, mental health. We could be thinking about the importance of healthy lifestyles. so much in there. And for image 5, sorry, you said a couple, but I like them all. I'm sorry, Helen. Image 5, I think, again, if we're being subjective, we could be thinking about somebody who might be playing a game. We could be thinking about socialization here. You could take, or it could be somebody who's incredibly shy and somebody who doesn't want to participate. So much you could get from that. And in image 7, last but not least on this slide, you could take this in two ways. You could think about conflict, because somebody might see that as conflict. There's been something going on here. Or it could be empathy, and you could really introduce all of those different things there.
Thanks, Jana. I'm just thinking about the depth and breadth of knowledge that the students would use or have to
Mm.
draw from to make, they could create those case studies for each other to review, and also to compare each other's experience knowledge, but also opinions on and assumptions that they make as well. That can really help with these powerful discussions and case studies that people said that they use already. So excellent. We've got some case study example photographs now that Janet, that I'm going to hand over to you with.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. So again, the powerful images that we've got here. So we've got the young girl there in image 1. She's exploring the flowers there. So she's outdoors. She's an appreciation of nature. And also we're bringing in ethnicity there as well. So we could talk about culture. We could talk about lifestyles, all of those things from a simple photograph image. When I look at image 2 and 3, I somehow want to see those together. And not obviously, not necessarily thinking this is the same child, but in image 2 and 3, we could look at a child of the same. We've got a young boy here, he could be of the same age, we could then think about something that might happen. That can have a real strong, devastating, traumatic experience for children, and how children might feel. Looking at images conjures feeling. It's a little bit like listening to music. You feel something immediately when you see an image, don't you? Whether it's thinking, oh, that makes me feel sad, or that's funny, or that's exciting. It gives you, it evokes something, and that will evoke discussion. So when we think about image 4, we can think about lifestyles, we can think about different family lifestyles. We can also think about the needs of families and diverse situations, and also just about different cultural expectations and the way that people live, which of course would be something that would lead us on nicely to that image there, those lovely children's faces in image 5, where we start to think about, education, and cultural family, and bringing up children and so on in different parts of the world. So not only does that help to contextualize what's going on in our own country, but it widens our understanding of education in a sort of wider context. And that's really good for teaching and learning experiences.
Absolutely. All of these images are copyright free. We use a website called Unsplash, and I've put the link to that website into the chat just so that you can see where these images have come from. But do remember that if you do use images, you need to ensure that they have no copyright restraints or constraints. So the next one's about challenging stereotypes.
Thank you, Helen. So some really good photographs here again. I think, when we're looking at all of these images, we've got a mixture of different things that we can subjectively explore, and also it's giving us some facts. So if we're looking at image 1, for example, this is a young girl who's obviously having some medical intervention. So we're thinking there, we can think about school interruption, we can think about illness, we can think about family support, the needs of siblings, how we can look at, she's holding her teddy bear. Why do we need to think about the importance of how some element of play and home and things will help this young girl? So much from that rich discussion can come out. Other professionals that might be involved, and how it's going to impact this young girl's immediate life, and you could think for the future and the family support as well. Image number two, I love that because that she's really going for it there in in the sports area. So I think here we could talk about, yes, you could think about challenging stereotypes around inclusion. You could also think about the importance of providing an environment where this young girl can participate, where she can actually join in and be part of a group, and how actually, you know, maybe bringing in a discussion and debate around the social model of disability versus medical, and could be something that you could discuss. And if we look at image three there, where we're looking at sort of sensory understanding, there's so much that you can bring there around development, around different cultures, around traditions, around what we play with, around safety. Um, so much that you could get from what people would perhaps first of all say, oh, what a lovely picture, right, let's unpick it. Is this child safe? Is this, you know, what's going on here? Lots of discussion points, I think, but it's a pretty picture regardless. And in image four and five, I think we're looking again at sort of, you know, the learning opportunities and what we perhaps expect in different areas in different parts of the world, and how and sort of the different factors that are involved in that, and again comparing to educational systems across the world, and the I suppose the importance or the criticality of what we have in our education system, and the you know, when compared to others, and how people thrive.
Absolutely, Janet. Now, something else that popped into my head as you were talking about image two was having the importance of positive role models as well. I straight away thought, well, that's
Absolutely.
an adapted wheelchair, therefore, and I could see her racing. So straight away, you know, thinking about the positive role models that are more visible and, you know, more accessible now than they were, for example, when you and I were younger. So how things have
Yeah,
changed as well. Yeah, lovely. And
absolutely.
then the last set of pictures, Janet.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so image number one, I'd probably want to compare perhaps with image number four. So we're looking at a sort of very traditional versus a very modern environment. Does that make a difference to how we learn? Does it make a difference to how we feel? Yes, no, why, how? So lots of debate going on there, where, you know, asking your students, where would you rather be? Why? Is it not more important to think about who's with you in that environment? So bringing it, you know, bringing rich commentary into the conversation. We've got an early years environment there with the little road mat. And so you could talk about that and the importance, you know, what's going on here? How is this learning? Think about socialization, self-directed play, and so on. And image number two, which is looks to me like a sort of very education, does that, when you compare that with one and four, does that mean, you know, you're doing well? What sort of things does that bring up? And then talking about different options in education and about getting things right for you. Question, sorry, image, I always call it a question. Image five, it's looking, obviously we're outside here, so we could talk about different sort of philosophical approaches. We're thinking about being outside, we're looking here at the animals, what are the benefits, the children engaged in nature, lots of learning opportunities there. And then, of course, something in image six that we often neglect, I think, sometimes, the skill and the learning that's involved in the creative arts. And we've got an image there of the painting. So you could talk about that and curricula and the emphasis that or lack of emphasis that we place on sort of performing arts, creative arts, and so on, and yet the skills involved in painting, in art, in singing, in drama, in music, bringing that up, and then maybe thinking about other pedagogical practices that put that at the forefront would be interesting for discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Janet. It just goes to show that some well-chosen images can provide a wealth of formative assessment activities, and they can be adapted and used depending on the needs of your student and your topic. So wonderful. The next element we'd like to explore is based on reflection. The screenshots you can see on the screen now are forms students could be asked to complete based on 3 different reflective models. The students could complete each form based on the same experience and then review which form or model was the most successful and why. This will help them to review and reflect on something they've learned or something they've done, but also help to consolidate the knowledge of the models and, of course, support the reflective practice further. Another quick reminder that if you have any questions, please remember to pop them into the question box. And then for a quick and easy starter activity or a check of learning, word searches and crossword puzzles can be very easily created using Puzzle Maker. So here are a couple of examples, and these are created using the core content from the qualifications spec. You could also ask your students to create puzzles for each other to complete, and that will allow more than one opportunity for you to assess the depth and breadth of their knowledge and understanding of a specific element or a specific context, question, topic area. And then just some quick examples of the type of question that could be used in a crossword puzzle that also link to the summative assessment activities. You could consider what aspects of the core you'd like to know more about what your students know, and you can focus the questions on those areas. If you'd like to know the answers to the questions, the first one relates to professional boundaries. The second one relates to rudder. Active experimentation is the final stage of Kolb's experiential learning cycle. The Equality Act is something that's already come up, and we'll not put Janet on the spot this time. This is the Education, Health and Care Plan for SEND students, and we did have some discussion about that one. But also getting your students to write these type of questions really helps you to assess the depth and breadth of the knowledge. So we're aware that your organisations may ask you to predict student grades. This first table provides some guidance in relation to what an A and E grade would look like. If we compare these two, the keywords for the A grade include consistently, comprehensive, critically analyse, substantiated judgments, relevant and accurate. And in comparison to that, for the E grade, the keywords include appropriate, some, basic, simple, limited, and rudimentary. This reminds me of the approach to grading used in HE, where the different grading bands demonstrate those higher order level thinking skills as they rise up the scale. However, in the live exams, assessments may vary slightly in levels of difficulty, and therefore the mark that represented a C grade in the external examination in one assessment window may not be appropriate in the following assessment window. So to address this, raw marks are converted to uniform marks. The Uniform Mark Scale, or UMS, also allows NCFE to account for the relative weighting of the assessment to the qualification as a whole. The maximum UMS points available for each assessment and the UMS points relating to each grade boundary are fixed, and these are shown on the second table on the screen. And all of this information that's shown now can be found in the qualifications specification. And you can use this information to help you to predict grades for the core assessments. And please talk to me in a curriculum consultation or a support call if you think you might find that useful. So some extra questions for consideration, please. And probably the most important one from a quality assurance or Ofsted perspective is how aware are your students of the results of their formative assessment activities that they're completing and how that relates to the progress they're making. We've also added some of the other areas which might be important to include here, but this list is not exhaustive and it would need to be individualised for each student. So if you have any other ideas or think areas you'd like to share, please pop them into the question box. And Janet, are there any other areas or ideas you'd like to add here, please?
I think the webinars covered so much and so many different strategies really in relation to formative assessment. But I suppose from a contextual point of view, just remembering, as I know happens in the classroom, being able to bring examples from industry are so powerful. So yes, we've got the images, we've got the case studies, but a lot of that rich knowledge that comes from actual examples from that day-to-day practice in the context, in this particular case, across education and childcare. So using that wealth of experience that you have yourselves, and also encouraging students to share as appropriate some examples of what they're learning from their own industry placement really helps, I think, to make good sense and tests their understanding as well of the knowledge that you're sort of that's being introduced in the classroom.
Absolutely, totally agree, Janet. But I think also we need to really make sure that we're not just formatively assessing and recording progress towards the knowledge development, towards the summative assessments, if you like. Think about those employability skills, the industry vital skills and competencies that the students are going to need to have when they finish their T-level program to actually make them employable. So that bottom one, so the problem solving, adaptability, proactivity, their objectivity, their professionalism, etc., etc. Everything that the students therefore need to be successful. You're not just teaching them the knowledge, you are the really important factor related to T levels is that they are able to use, analyze, and review that knowledge as well and how they apply it in the industry. And I think that's the biggest difference between T levels and A levels, because A levels are knowledge based. T levels have strong depth and breadth of content of knowledge there, but it's also about applying that to placement. Would you agree, Janet?
I absolutely would. And in fact, you may arguably say that it's because of that even more demanding because, these students have got to be able to attain a certain level of theoretical understanding, but more than that, they've not got to just theoretically apply that into situations, but they are going to see that happening and they're going to have to be thinking on their feet in a real work environment. So absolutely the importance and the coherence of theory and practice. It's so important, and it's as important as it always has been in education and childcare.
Absolutely, thank you. We haven't had any further questions come in, so I'm just going to move straight to the next poll, and the next and final poll, and it relates to hopefully want to capture the impact of today's session. Has it impacted on or improved your skills, knowledge, or confidence, or has it simply provided? Well, simply, it's not simply at all. Has it provided reassurance that what you're doing already is best practice and will meet the needs of the T-level program? So I'm going to launch that final poll. Please let us know. Um, after attending today's session, has your confidence, understanding, etc., of using, adapting, and applying formative assessment methods changed at all? Has it improved at all, or has it stayed about the same and it has consolidated that what you're doing is good practice? So yes, wonderful. People are starting to vote now. So if you could just let us know how you feel the session has impacted on your understanding and confidence levels of um, formative assessment. We're nearly there with everybody. So, oh, brilliant. We have a 50-50 split. I'm going to close that poll now and just share the results. So we do have people, everybody has said that it has improved to an extent. So thanks for that. We've got slightly and moderately improved. So brilliant. But as I say, even if it hadn't really changed and it was simple, I can't stop saying that word. If it was consolidating your skills and knowledge, that's just as relevant as important. But please remember that attending this session is just the start of your effective CPD. Please use what you've heard, learned, or thought about today to evaluate your practice on more of an ongoing basis. Try out new or different formative assessment methods and evaluate their effectiveness, please. So thanks for that. Brilliant. So we've reached the end of today's session. Many thanks for attending and participating. I will give you a quick reminder that there's an evaluation form as you log out, and we really do rely on your feedback and ideas to inform and improve our CPD activities. I'm going to say goodbye and let Janet have the last word for today.
Thank you. Just to say thank you to everybody giving up their time to come onto the webinar. And if you're listening to this webinar on pre-recorded, I hope you get something from it. There's lots to take from it. And yeah, have a really good weekend if you're listening live.
Thanks, Janet, and thanks everybody. So we'll say farewell. If you have any questions, please do contact us either directly or through your account exec. But thank you, stay safe, stay fit and well, and we do look forward to working with you more in the future.